Chapter 12. As soon as Malou lifted her head from the steering wheel and looking through the windshield once again, she gasped. She was no longer parked alongside a sidewalk of her neighbourhood, but in some sort of zoo. There were animal cages all around the car with beasts of all kinds growling or howling at her. Fear gripped her, and with a trembling hand she opened the car door. If Dan is in cage somewhere around here, I've got to find him, she thought. Oh, yes you do, Malou, she heard Damianos' voice say from behind her. Where is this place? Malou demanded. Where's Dan? What have you done with him? Too many questions, my dear, and none of the answers will interest you in the least when I tell you that your husband is not here. But what is this place? Malou repeated, looking around her, aghast. These are people who have tried to cross me, and they'll be caged in here until they come to their senses. Come to their senses? What does that mean? Are they insane? In a way, yes. You see, Malou, once you've passed the threshold of reasoning into the world of the phantasmagoric, you've entered my house, and these beasts are mere representations of the imagery portrayal of themselves. But why have you brought me here? Malou asked, getting more intrigued by the minute. I've not lost my senses, and I've not gone insane, but that I know of anyway, so why? Because I intend to send you and Dan on a mission. A mission? What sort of mission? Malou's voice rose instantly over the growls emanating from the cages surrounding her. If you didn't interrupt me at every turn, I would be able to tell you, Damianos said admonishingly. Malou, having calmed down slightly, looked at the little man standing in front of her. He was no longer dressed in his dark suit or wearing a hat. He was now clad of some sort of safari suit and vest, an appropriate attire for the circumstances, Malou thought. Well then, tell me, what mission are we supposed to accomplish for you, dear Damianos? I've told you before, Malou, sneering doesn't become you, but never mind. Let me explain what I would like you to do to save you and your husband from certain perdition. Perdition? What on earth are you saying? Aha, I see the word has ignited recognition of the gravity of the situation in your mind, hasn't it? All I know is that perdition means that I would be lost or in limbo. Precisely, Malou, and I know this is not something you want to happen to you or Dan, now do you? Of course not. So go on, tell me what you want us to do, Malou said, looking at the ground beneath her feet, and suddenly realizing that she was also dressed differently. Her slacks, shirt, and vest were very similar to those Damianos wore. Are you sending us on a safari or something? She sniggered. Not exactly, but these clothes will be more suitable for your mission indeed. All right, Damianos, cut the crap, Malou erupted, and tell me what we have to do. If sneering doesn't become you, my dear, I would say impatient trumps it, but determination is what I need from you and Dan. You see, long ago I misplaced a book of ordnance, if you like. It was written in ancient Greek, and it was a guide to eternal redemption. However, someone snatched it from my care, and although I know who took the book, I have yet to find it. Malou was astonished. If Damianos had been searching for this book all these years and hadn't been able to find it, how could he expect her or Dan to find it? I can see that the prospect of the search for the book is a little daunting to you, isn't it? You could say that, yes, but have you asked Dan already? Oh yes, but thus far he's refused to contemplate the opportunity. His obstinacy is a little disconcerting, I must say. Nevertheless, it's the only thing that will get you back to the drugstore and back to Pahokee before midnight. And where do we start searching, or do you know? I gather by your answer that you have accepted the challenge, then. If you have a feasible place for us to start the search, I would say yes. If not, then I would have to decline the opportunity, as you call it, and side with Dan. Very well, then, Damianos said, a thin smile appearing on his lips. I shall give you a clue which should help you in your decision. He paused and frowned, as if he had to think of the next sentence he would pronounce. Years ago I inhabited your house. It was then an old rambling mansion owned by a woman of means, but who would not spend a dime on fixing the place. And as in any of these houses, there were many secrets held in its walls. He chuckled. I'm thinking of that saying, keeping skeletons in the closet. But let's not get off the subject. Do you mean our house is where the book was hidden originally? Very astute of you, Malou, but no, or should I say not initially, no. The old lady took books that she liked from the library, collected them, and never returned any of them. And your book ended up on her bookshelf, is that it? Yes, I used to guard it at the library when I was a youngster, but then I discovered it gone one day and began searching for it. When I heard the librarian tell someone that she suspected Solange to have taken it, I was asked to find my way to her place, and there it was. But why didn't you take it back right there and then? Because I couldn't. Why is that? And don't tell me it was because you were a cat. In fact, that's the very reason I couldn't grab it from the top shelf. It is a very heavy volume, and I couldn't possibly move it. But you're not a cat now. May I remind you that I appear in your thoughts only in the form of a human being, whereas in reality I am a cat with limited powers, and powers that do not enable me to lift heavy objects. And that's why you need human beings to get this book back for you, isn't it? Damiano smiled. I can't begrudge the intellect with which you have been endowed, my dear, and you're the first person who's really taken an interest in my plight. But Nurse Pina was the first to see you. She described you exactly the way you appeared to Dan and me in the hospital, and even Heath saw you. Ah, yes, but you see, I had to have someone inject the drug into Dan's IV drip, and it was really easy for her to do so. You mean she's also under your spell now? No, she's served her purpose and has nothing to worry about. No one will ever know that she got the drug from the herbalist, or that she injected it the night of Dan's arrival at the hospital. What about Heath? He saw you too, Malou questioned. That was transference. He had heard you talk about such a visitor, and Natalie was right there, behind him when he thought he saw me. In reality, he didn't see anything. And all of this rigmarole was to induce Dan and me into finding and returning a book to you. And by the way, you're the owner of this infamous book. Haven't you guessed it yet? I think I have, but since you described it as a book of ordinance toward eternal redemption, I would have to question my answer. You see, Damios, a cat, has many lives, or so they say, but he has only one lasting identity. And yours is unmistakable. You are the tamer of ancient Greece, and this is why you have all of these animals around you. Most of them you couldn't tame or return to the wild because they had trespassed or have not accomplished their dedicated mission. Isn't that the true reason for me being here? I had to recognize you for who you really are, the tamer, the guide, and the one who will take me and Dan to perdition if we don't find a way to redemption. You are neither evil nor good, Damianos. You are what we want you to be. Am I correct? You are absolutely correct, Malou, but Dan, for the moment, is lost in the jungle of his imagination, obsessed by the fact that I'm not guiding him where he wants to go. But he only wants to go back to Pahokee and return to our lives. Damiano shook his head vigorously. No, Malou, he doesn't. He wants to prove his strength once again. He doesn't realize that he has no longer anything to prove to anyone, including himself. And you want me to bring him back from that jungle and begin searching for the book in our house? Is that the plan? Not only begin searching, Malou, but I want you to find it. But the house has practically been entirely rebuilt when we bought it, and none of the books or bookshelves still exist today. So how do you expect us to find something that is no longer there to find? Your practical mind is overwhelming your imagination, Malou, and I don't think, in this instance, you would want to be practical. On the contrary, once you have returned Dan to his senses, I will return you to the old house, and then it's up to you to locate the book, if the old woman hasn't stashed it someplace else in the meantime. All right, Damianos, all right, Dan screamed at the top of his voice. Lead me wherever you want, as long as it's out of this damn jungle. He waited for an answer that didn't come. At a loss to know what else to do, he sat down at the foot of a tree and looked up at the canopy of foliage, covering the forest like an umbrella. His eyes travelled upward and around the glimmer of lights above him until he felt something slither across his thighs. Ugh! He shouted when he realised a snake was creeping its way across his lap. He froze, terrified. Don't worry, Dan. The poor thing's not interested in you in the least, Damiano said, standing in front of him now. Snakes are generally disinterested in human beings. Just tell me what you want me to do to get out of here, you damn idiot. I don't think I deserve your insults, but I'll let that pass for the moment. And why would that be? Or is it because you have me at your mercy that you don't care what I say anymore? Partly yes, and partly because your dear wife is the one who's going to guide you out of here. You mean Malou is here? How could you? She doesn't deserve any of this. You're sadly mistaken if you think I'm the one who brought her back to your side. No, it was her sole decision. Oh dear God, Dan, what are you trying to do? Malou erupted when she saw Dan get to his feet and try grasping the figure of Damianos in front of him. Dan stopped and stared at his wife. Has the devil persuaded you to come to my assistance? He shouted at Malou's face. Because if he has, don't bother. I'll get out of here without anyone's help, and then I'll kill him. He pointed to Damianos, who was standing a couple of steps away, snickering. Don't be a fool, Dan. A fool? Now look who's calling the kettle black. You're siding with the devil himself, and you're calling me the fool? Will you stop? Malou shouted, realising now what Damianos meant when he told her that she needed to bring Dan back to his senses.